Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Alison, good morning.
Hi, Andrea. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm good. It's the first very cold day here today, so it's a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
But it looked very beautiful out the window, which was a kind of a bonus, you know?
Yeah.
White everywhere. How are you?
I'm good, actually. It's getting cold here, too. We've had some frost. We've had a lot of flooding the last few weeks. It's been raining much heavier rain than usual. I think a lot of creeks and rivers have passed boundaries that they haven't in 40 years. So lots of our favorite farms have been flooded completely. A lot of the farming out here happens in the floodplain, so they expect some flooding, and they're accustomed to it, but this kind of exceeded everything that everyone was accustomed to. So, they have their systems in place for the normal amount of flooding, kind of like the Nile, coming in and bringing all that, that rich silt in. But this was much more than that. So lots of destruction that people are dealing with, and our own gravel road washed out twice. So we just keep patching it up because we need to put a bridge in there.
I see.
Yeah. So lots of water. So this is super exciting, Alison. Our last episode of the year. This weird.
I can't believe it.
I know. I keep thinking back to when we started, and it was so cold, and I was huddled in front of the fire down here, and we didn't know. We still don't know what I'm doing, but we really didn't know. But here we are, finishing up the last episode. So first, I want to say thank you to the patrons who are helping us bring this all to your headphones or whatever you're listening on. So thank you to the patrons. We actually have 2 new patrons since the last time we talked. Dr. Kate, welcome. Thank you, Dr. Kate, for being a patron of the show. And Stephanie, thank you, Stephanie. And Stephanie was on our live cook-up that we did. So the quarterly cook-up that patrons are welcome to join. Alison and I in our kitchens cooking together and dealing with people.
And she baked what I baked in that cook-up, which is exciting.
She made the castanaccio.
She baked it.
Yeah, she posted a picture on Instagram. We can tag that in the show notes so you guys can see her edition of it. So, So thank you, patrons. We all of us.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Thank you very much for to everyone really who's supported us. We've got 9 patrons now.
That's wild.
And it just means the world to us because I sit down here in the lower part of my house recording with you, Andrea, and it's very difficult to know where things go, how it hits, and just every time that I get a notification of someone who has really gone out of their way to support what we're doing, it warms my heart and encourages me to carry on and do more. So thank you.
And I know that there's a lot of listeners who appreciate it as well. They appreciate the patrons.
Yeah.
So big thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry.
I agree.
A little tickle there.
And I'd just like to thank everyone who's listened, everyone who's commented, everyone who's shared our stuff, everyone who's reviewed us, everyone who's really had any part in what we've done. All that feedback is so important and so that word again, heartwarming.
It's
really
such a do you go onto Instagram and it says somebody mentioned you in your stories and you're like, what? So then you go and you're like, wow, they posted my post or they talked about the podcast or whatever. It's just so cool. So we're not like this corporate office where you can post things and it goes into the void and we don't care. Like, no, we message each other screenshots and we're like, look what she posted. We get very excited. So thanks you guys for that. It really helps.
Yeah. I could read. We haven't read any of our Apple reviews. And I didn't even know we had any until I went onto Apple Podcasts. I was like, oh, look, there's some reviews here.
I don't know how to do that, so I'm impressed that you do.
And I thought that I could read one of them.
Yeah.
Because
I want to hear it.
It might chime with other people who are listening. So it's one that was left earlier on in the year. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. I'm not going to read the bad ones. And it seems like it's posted by someone called C.K. Miller. So if you're listening, thank you. And it's titled, I Was Thankful to Find It.
Oh.
And this person says, I do love this podcast. I'm in the beginning stages of my journey, and I appreciate that they talk about their own journeys and at the same time are still learning and growing, yet to be experts. It encourages me and challenges me at the same time, which is nice.
Okay, I
think that's what we like to get across. You know, we're not experts.
Yeah.
We're learning, we're growing. And we were once I'd never made sauerkraut. Once I'd never made milk kefir. Yeah. You know, we're all on a journey, and like this person says, we're all learning and growing. So challenging and inspiring is good.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that podcast because you and I talked before we started. We discussed like the scope and the vision for our podcast, and that review really sums up what you and I said in the beginning, that it seems like so many, I don't know. I sometimes get overwhelmed when I try to listen to podcast episodes or something, and it's all this really heavy duty technical stuff from people who are like, oh, I have never eaten food from a grocery store ever. And it's like, what? I'm just not on that level. Help. Mm-hmm. Like, where do I begin? So, that review really hits the nail on the head. That's exactly what you and I said when we started, Alison, that this is the podcast we wish we had when we started.
Yeah, so completely. Yeah. That was my motivation entirely. Mm-hmm. This is the podcast that I want to listen to. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to make it. No, not unfortunately, because I get to talk to you, which is just awesome. So,
okay, I'm gonna move this chair that my thing is sitting on for just 1 second. So, hang on. I hope it doesn't make a funny sound. But I think I might have figured out what part of the funny sound is from my microphone, Alison. I noticed the edge of this cushion I'm sitting on is pushing up against the leg of the chair, and then I noticed just out of the corner of my eye the like slightest vibration in the frame that holds the microphone, and I wonder if that's what it is. Never noticed that before. Okay.
So you take the cushion away. You're not allowed comfort.
I'm gonna stand and record. Okay, so let's okay.
Let's talk about food.
Such a great podcast until that episode, and then they just kind of lost it. Okay, let's talk about the past year and recording a podcast.
What about your breakfast? We're not going to talk about your breakfast first.
Wow,
Did you eat? Did you eat today?
I take notes. Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I had a lovely breakfast this morning. So, let's see. What did I have? I have these little einkorn rolls left over from Thanksgiving, so I split. They're really tiny. Excuse me. Sorry. Because when you have a big dinner, you want a tiny roll. You don't want a giant roll because you want to try all the different gravies and everything. And then I had some sharp cheddar. I toasted the biscuit in a little bit of lard, and then I toasted a little bit of thinly sliced turkey, leftover turkey breast, in some of the lard, and then I had 2 hard-boiled eggs, and anyways, I had some Ningxia Red and a little bit of orange juice with collagen and turmeric in it. And now I'm
beautiful.
Yeah, it was really good. I really have noticed that like it makes a big difference for me. I got really lazy taking the Ningxia Red, which for my body I noticed had some detrimental effects over the past month and a half. So I just put it back onto my schedule as don't forget, take it in the morning, just like an ounce, I think that...
Could you explain to people listening who don't know what it is?
Oh, well, it's a beverage made out of... It's a whole fruit puree, basically, of Ningxia berries with essential oils from a bunch of different plants. And for some reason, with me and my tendency towards having, I don't know if it's anemia or just low iron processing systems in my body or what it is, for some reason, that is the thing that stands between me and the slippery slope. So I had to go back to making sure I take that every day. And now I'm just drinking some coffee with a little raw milk that I steamed and some maple syrup, and I'm feeling pretty happy.
That's a veritable buffet for breakfast. That sounds lovely.
I have noticed
Really
that I
nice.
like having a little bit of a lot of different things rather than just one big thing. So like, I don't know why it makes me happy to have that variety, just like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this.
I think there's a sort of a taste sensation. You get all those different sensations of taste, but also there's a kind of abundance thing that brings in.
Yeah.
It just feels so nice.
No, you're right, Alison. Actually, that abundance is a great note, because I've noticed that if I have a little bit of a lot of different things, I don't need very much to feel like satisfied in my brain and in my body. And like that variety you touched on, crunch and like squishy biscuit and like density of cheese and all those things. Whereas if I just had one like homogeneous bowl of something, my brain would be seeking the variety and translate it into just I need more, you know. Interesting, Alison.
I get that.
Well, another another food psychotherapy session with Alison. Okay, did you have lunch? Because I'm hoping you did.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you eat?
We're well, all three of us were home today, so we
Nice.
had lunch, all three of us, and Flavio, my farmer, had some sheep, so for mutton, i.e. not lamb, recently. So we got a load of sheep, and I asked him for the innards, and he gave me a bag which in Italian is called la corrata, which seems to be basically the upper part of the innards, so no stomach and intestines, no tripe, but ham, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the pancreas, the spleen, and some other unidentified thing that I didn't know what it was, but I trust Flavio, so we ate it. Anyway, I cut all these up separately because I was semi-tempted to make something called corratella, which is a fry-up, basically, of all of the insides of an animal that I just listed. You have to put the liver in later because the liver takes less time to cook. But I thought that might be a bit too much for us because it was a sheep, so it's quite a lot, weight. It wasn't a small animal's intestines,
Like a chicken
small
or
animal's
something.
innards. Yeah, exactly. So I separated them all and I sliced the liver and I froze it, and I froze all the other things as well. Got the liver out yesterday to defrost and cooked it for lunch today. And what was interesting was that these sheep are completely grass-fed, which is why I jumped on them, because not every animal that a Flavio has is entirely grass-fed, but these sheep are. And we eat liver a lot, but usually it's pig or cow liver. And I've got really, really used to the taste of pig and cow liver over the last 5 years, because we used to get it in England as well. And as I was cooking this sheep's liver, I realised lamb's liver was the thing that my mum cooked when I was a kid. It's the only liver she bought and the only liver she cooked. And suddenly I was just transported to being at home and my mother doing liver and bacon, because the smell was so different to the smell of pig liver or cow's liver. Wow. And the taste was amazing. I don't know if it's just because I like sheep's liver or whether because it's grass-fed it was particularly good. But I was completely sold. I was like, I want more sheep. I want more sheep's liver. This is my favourite type of liver. And I don't dislike the other livers. I like them. So we had very nice liver, which I fried in lard. And then we had broccoli, which is from the local market, purple broccoli, which I just boiled. And then we had 2 types of bread. One was a kefir leavened spelt, milk kefir leavened spelt. The other one was an experiment, which was grains from the rye beer that I made last week, which I dehydrated. And then I ground half of them into flour, left half of them chunky, and I made a kind of pumpernickel style rye bread. So 100% rye. The only thing I put in it was the grains from the beer, and I put spices in, and I put a starter with it. When I put the starter in it, I thought, you know what? These grains have already been eaten by the stuff in the beer, the yeasts in the beer, because they made us beer. Does this starter going to do anything? Because have they been eaten up, or is the starter going to eat more of them? Does it eat different things because it's bacteria, not just yeast? And that sort of made me think for a moment, but I did it anyway. And then I made this pumpernickel loaf, which was delicious. So we had a slice of that and a slice of the spelt kefir bread with lard on. We pretty much always spread lard on our breads at lunch. And then we had some of the rye ale with it, which is now, I think in the last podcast, I explained that I've changed my starter. Instead of making a separate sourdough starter, I started with a Boza starter. And so that's a yeast dominant starter, really heavy yeast dominant, not bacteria. And what I did when I made the last beer with that was I just kept some of the spent grain in a glass container in the fridge because it's got yeast all over it. And I just threw that back in the beer when I started a new one last week to start the beer. And it turned out really nice.
Man.
So, yeah, it was a good lunch.
I got chills when you described the smell of the liver and how it took you back to your mom cooking. That is such a visceral experience.
It was strange. I don't think I've ever cooked sheep liver myself, since I've not been in that house. It's been a long time because I've just had pig liver and cow liver all the time. And the smell was so different and so immediately evocative that, I'm sure that everyone's listening has a food that they grew up with, that they remember the smell of.
Yeah.
And then when they cook it, it just takes them back to that place. And yeah, this liver, it added to my enjoyment of the meal.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Well, that's two thoughts come to my mind, and one is when I first started using essential oils, people would say this thing like, essential oils or fragrance smell in general is the quickest means of moving somebody's brain into a memory, because it literally goes in and physically contacts, through your olfactory system, physically contacts your brain and can take you back. And they would always use the example of, the smell of your grandma cooking apple pie, like this sort of familiar smell. And I thought that was really interesting when I first heard it. And then once I heard it, I started paying attention and I was like, wow, this really is true. I even have, I confess on the air, I have a conventional chemical sort of lotion, body lotion. It's in a bottle that's almost empty, and it's still in the same plastic bag that it was in, 15 years ago or whatever, in my closet. And I don't wear it. I don't use it. But every once in a while, I take it out and smell it.
You just sniff it.
It was the lotion I was wearing the summer I met Gary. And it literally immediately takes me into that, all the memories, the whole space, everything.
Yeah.
And it's wild. So I can't get rid of it. Somebody would probably be horrified, be like, Andrea, you have that in your house. But I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry. It has to be there.
Yeah, no.
And
amen to that.
The other thought is the gift that you are giving Gabe, because his visceral memories, holiday memories, traditional memories, thoughts that bring him joy, foods that bring him joy, will be these good things. Because there are things that people say all the time, I've cut everything out, but every once in a while I have to go back to this because it's what my mom made when I was little. And sometimes it's not something that really serves their body, which is fine. You can have those little things here and there. But how cool is it that he will have all these amazing memories associated with these good foods?
Yeah. I don't know which memories. I mean, it's almost like everything, the beer and all the ferments and the bread and the offal and the veggies and the market. I wish that more of that magic had been in my childhood. I found it now, so that's fine, and I'm giving it to him. But I'm happy that I'm giving it to him. I think it's the best thing to say there. Really. So yes, that's our food.
As we dive in, I just want to excuse me, apologize to the listeners if you hear me coughing these horrible coughs. Maybe Rob can edit some of them out, but I just got over a cough, and so every once in a while it's and now that I'm sitting here thinking don't cough, then it's like I just want to cough. Yeah. So let's talk about this stuff, Alison. Let's go back through the year and discuss some things. You know, where did the podcast start? What's it doing now? And then what have you and I been doing over the span of this year? And maybe
great. So I think, you know, we're as we're recording, we're virtually in December, and this time last year, although the podcast wasn't on the air because we didn't publish any episodes until March, we were just starting to record episodes, not knowing what we're doing with kind of cables and screens and things everywhere. And I remember with fondness recording the tune for the intro, because those, if you don't know, listeners, those chickens, those animals in the intro are Andrea's animals, and the sound at the beginning is me frying pancakes in a cast iron pan. So Rob had to hold the recording device there while I poured pancakes into my pan.
Yeah.
And then Rob's recording your birds. And then Rob said, "Oh, I can do some music," and he kind of just sat down, and it just came together really nicely, and it's got lots of nice memories.
I really think that we need to put the pig song on the Patreon. Because I love that pig song.
You know what? That's a good idea. What Andrea is referring to is my husband's a musician, and he wrote a song several years ago about pigs, and he actually did a big project on it about factory farm pigs.
It's an amazing
and it's kind of a rock and roll style song. We could put that on Patreon.
Oh my gosh, please ask him, because it's so good. It's so catchy, and it's a song we all want stuck in our head.
Okay. So yeah, that was a year ago. Wow. And you looked up how many downloads we had, didn't you?
I did.
Before we came on
today.
How many have we got?
So we're recording this in the end of November, and we have 14,000 plus downloads.
That just,
oh my word.
I can't get my head around that.
Have you ever heard people say, you know, oh, if you do a Facebook Live or you're doing like an Instagram Live class or something and only 5 people show up, don't be mad that it was only 5 people. Imagine if 5 people had like walked into your house and were standing there watching you. So when I saw this, I was like, hey, Alison, how would you like to sing to 14,000 people? Like, would we even be able to get the words out? We're looking.
I think my heart would be beating too fast to speak.
Like, food. What's food? What's food? I don't remember what food is.
Yeah.
But
I think so.
It's safe. We're in our basements recording.
Yeah, it feels slightly different. But yeah, those figures are difficult to comprehend. But they fill me with hope, because this information that, you know, this growing that we're doing, this learning that we're doing, this own journey we're taking is so important for health, for our children, for the environment, for the planet. And so the fact that 12,000 people or 12,000 downloads have happened gives me, you know, hope, I think it's the best word, that people are interested. You know, people want to know more, people want to learn, people want to learn more, do more, and want guides, and it's nice that we can share that and help in the little way we can.
The most popular episode, actually, I know there's one that's been in the lead for a long time, but it kind of got usurped. The Nourishing Traditions book episode has become now our most downloaded episode of all. That is a great episode. And you know what's funny, Alison, is that episode I had that problem with my microphone, so every once in a while you hear that funny sound. And when I was messaging with Hilda, I'll tag her in the comments, but for anybody who's listening, Holistic Hilda or Hilda Labrada Gore, she's the hostess of the Wise Traditions podcast. And she was so generous to listen and give me some feedback. And she said, you know what? Sometimes those things happen, but if the content is good, the listeners will stay. And her wisdom is proven by the fact that that is the most popular episode now. That's crazy. So she knows her stuff.
I really enjoyed that episode. I enjoyed that episode.
Honestly, that was one of the episodes I probably had to prepare the most for, because I wanted to give specific page numbers, and I had to go through the entire Nourishing Traditions cookbook page by page. So yeah, that took a minute.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know, 700 pages or something.
Yeah, well,
a lot of pages.
The second most popular episode is the one that was in the lead for a long time, Quitting Supermarkets. That's episode number 9. So that
so that one I did a lot of
the heavy lifting
work for.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have talked to me about that episode, and I'm hoping that next year we might be able to revisit it. We did say that.
Yeah.
To kind of have an update, and also to help give people more guidance if they do want to do that, as to how they can, and inspire them to move to the next step along that journey. So I'm pleased that one.
I'd like to bring some
is
farmers into the podcast and talk to them and have them give, from the farmer's perspective, what are ways that we can work with farms. And because I will say, by and large, I've gone to farms in a lot of different states in the United States, wherever we've lived, and the questions I ask, more or less the answers are the same across the board. So if 10 farmers here are saying it's a really good idea for a customer to do X, that's probably generally going to be true for most farms. So I'd love to get some
really
farmer
useful
interviews in 2022. I already have some farmers that I've talked to, and they've said, yeah, we'll sit down. So
excellent.
So we'll get some of that up for you guys, some on here and some bonus content on for the patrons as a thank you. Our third most popular episode is episode number 10, and I'm not surprised by this at all. It's the interview with Ellie from Ellie's Everyday.
That was such a good episode.
How can you not love that one?
Yeah.
She is really a sourdough genius, and I know we've talked about her a lot on the podcast, but we're just big fans. So if you don't know where to start with sourdough, instead of sending people 40 links and trying to explain things and copying pages out of books and texting it to them from now on, all I've done ever since I met Ellie is just send them her. I'm like, just go here. This is where
that interview is very good, and there was a bit in it where she surprised even me when she said that she doesn't ever get her starter out and make a special leaven for bread, for sourdough. She just keeps it in the fridge, and it's been in there however many days, and she just uses it. And I think so many people are so kind of caught up on they need to take the starter out, they need to feed it, they need to do this, that and the other. And no, she just keeps a blob of starter in the fridge and uses it. And I think that, that and all the other tips she gives in that episode, it's definitely worth a listen. And if you haven't listened to it, if you listen to it then and you've moved on your sourdough baking, listen again, because you'll pick up more.
Yeah, I think that's what surprised me the most too, was when she said that. I thought that was really good. But what's really again special and unique about her is that she works by observing and modulating her response to what she observes. So she observed that she could get away with that, and so she does it. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, well, the book says, So
yeah, well, why not? We've all got incredibly busy lives, and that's what stops people making sourdough in so many cases. And so, hooray,
And we all want somebody to come into our kitchen and show us how to make sourdough. We all should have been given that experience, like Gabe and I know my kids all have the experience of working in the kitchen making bread. That should be how, that should be how. If you're feeling bad, like, I don't know how to cook sourdough, don't feel bad. And if your mom feels bad, I didn't teach you how to cook sourdough, she doesn't need to feel bad about it. This was kind of taken out of our hands. And Alison, you and I talked about this in Quitting Supermarkets with the industrialization of bread making and all of that. But so we all want somebody to come into our kitchen and give us back that gift that was taken from us. we don't all get to do that. The closest I would say you can get to that is go and watch Ellie, because it's an actual video, and it's free, and she's talking to you, you know, and she explains things and makes them understandable. So it's kind of like having her in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And so we've done 2 of the live Zoom cook-alongs now, Alison. Yeah. And I think we're kind of planning to do one every season. So winter, spring, summer, and fall with, you know, seasonal foods. Those are really fun. So,
and there's other stuff up on the Patreon feed as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I think we've got 11-ish. Do we have 11 or 12?
Probably 12 by the end of the year, or maybe 13 by the end of the year.
On the patron feed. So for the patrons, just as a extra gratitude for being financial sponsors of the show, we've created a special podcast feed where we put extra content that's just for the patrons. Sometimes it's bonus interviews after the podcast interviews. There's another interview with Ellie on there. There's another interview with Rob, all about tech stuff on there. And then also the recordings, video and audio from the live cook-alongs that we invite the patrons to. Those go up there as well. So
yeah, and hopefully even more next year. I've really enjoyed creating extra content.
I know.
Got lots of ideas for next year.
I have so many.
Hopefully that will just get bigger.
I have so many ideas.
Me too. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about what we've learnt from the process of putting together the podcast, because I think it's certainly for me there are some lessons in there which I think are useful to share. Shall I go first, or do you want to?
Why don't you go? I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
Before I say something wrong. Just kidding.
I would say, there's quite a few things that I've learnt. In brief, I would say that I've learnt that I can talk about things, not just write. So in the past, I've lacked confidence in talking, and I wouldn't say hidden behind writing, because I love writing. But I've thought, I'll write about it. But I've been very, very nervous to talk. And I think this year has shown me that I can talk about things, because, you know, I've had people telling me, you know, it's great. I love the way you explained that. Great. You know, you talked about that in such a clear way. And I'd say, well, I was a bit nervous and I didn't know if I sounded right. And they were like, no, you sounded brilliant. So there's given me some confidence that I can actually talk. I don't have to hide behind, you know, pre-planned words all the time. The second thing that it's taught me is that working together is better than working alone. I think I mentioned on one of the other podcasts that when I first had the idea of doing a podcast, I tried recording some bits on my own and it just sounded terrible. And so, you know, working with you to be able to bounce off each other and get inspired by each other and help each other not only has made the recordings more enjoyable for me, but also working with you to promote it and to do all the admin around it. It's incredible to have someone else to work with, you know, and someone, if in your and my case, our skills and our personality complement each other. You know, we've got other sides of a circle in a lot of things. And that's been a wonderful experience this year, because I haven't had much experience in the past of launching something that then becomes more than just me. You know, it's something that you and I do together, and it as a creative project, it has its own life as something that's shared. And that's been really interesting to watch this year. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to point out was that I've also learned that things don't have to be perfect. It's easy for me, and I think for a lot of people, to hide behind perfectionism and never get anything done. But I know that's just a horrible thing to follow. And putting it out and seeing that we've had that many people download and that many people engage and that many people want to support us, even though it's not been 100% perfect how I would like it in a, you know, if I had a dream world, just shows me it doesn't need to be perfect, you know. Right. These are standards that are just crazy and set in my head, and they stop the imparting and the sharing and the community if you hide behind them. So that's my 2 cents worth, I think, on what it's taught me this year. It's been wonderful to learn all those things.
Do you ever?
How about you?
Well, do you ever go to a podcast that's been around for a while and you scroll back to the beginning and you like want to hear that first one and it's all raw and the sound is kind of tinny or whatever and you're like, yeah, they're just doing it like recording this, just conversation in the garage or whatever, and it's so cool. I love that. So I think the thing I learned is that the technology is definitely the hardest part for me.
Okay.
Poor Rob, like trying to comprehend what I'm saying from across the ocean, like through Instagram or whatever. Well, it's a thing that has it's like a cord thingy, So I think the best thing he said was, well, if I could be there sitting next to you, I could see what you were doing and I could help, So it's definitely been a learning curve for me as far as the technology goes. You and I having kind of internet, you're in Florence, Italy, I'm in Washington State, USA, and so we're having to do all these independent recordings, and then Rob is having to mix them, and your battery might go out, or my headphones weren't plugged in, or something has happened, and it's just I'm very grateful that we have Rob. This would not be happening. This would not be making it to the air without Rob, because he has salvaged so many episodes that, there's been times I just felt sick that, oh no, I ruined it, but he was able to piece it back together. So that's really impressive to me.
I resonate with that because that happens in my life very often, and he pieces it back together.
Well, now we know what his mission is. And then right when we hit kind of this apex of things being crazy for me, and I know you guys had a lot with, it was before Gabe went back to school and stuff like that. Sabrina and Colleen kind of jumped in because they saw me kind of drowning, and they were like, let us help. So they helped work on the show notes and timestamps for a big chunk of time. So I'm really grateful for that. And then
thank you both.
All the work Sabrina's doing on trying to get our little graphic done and whatnot. So having people come alongside and just say, hey, we're here, we can help. They believe in the message as well that we're trying to share, and so I'm grateful for that help from them. So thanks, girls. That's kind of. Also, I've learned, and I just did it. I just did it, but I've learned by re-listening. For all of you listeners, the show notes have been written by a variety of people. Alison, me, Sabrina, and Colleen have all taken shifts. And when it's my turn, I have to listen to myself talk. And that's probably one of the most painful things you'll ever do, listen to myself talk. But one thing I've learned is I don't always finish my sentences. I start a sentence and then I leave it hanging, and I just start a new sentence and I move on to something else, because you're thinking, oh, I'll write down this as a quote that we could use on the podcast show notes, and then I never finish the sentence. So that, I guess, like you said, I think you came onto the air, Alison, already polished and knowing how to speak. I don't know. Is Winston Churchill like your grandpa or something?
It's just because I've got a British accent. I sound like I do. No, that helps, right?
No, that's not true, Alison, because I have taken show notes and I can get more quotes out of you than I can out of me. Because you finish your sentence.
I like listening to you. Even if you don't finish your sentences, apparently, I like listening to you.
Well, thanks. So listening to myself, I think, has actually helped me to improve my self slowly as we go, learning to not jump in with a bunch of ums and ahs. I think that's one of the first things that I learned speaking in general to people, doing Facebook Live videos and things like that, was when I don't know what to say, just be silent for a second rather than pack in an or an ah in the middle. So that's not related to ancestral food at all, but if anybody's wanting to speak. There you go.
It's hard to do that, though. I remember before Gabriel was born, I joined a Toastmasters group in Florence, and I used to go and speak there. And I only stayed there for about 5 months because I got pregnant and we went back to England. But just a few speeches I did there, the practicing of them at home made me realise how much I ummed and ahed and how much I rushed. And yeah, like you say, listening to yourself, anyone who's done any sort of speaking, listening to yourself is really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's important and painful. It's like watching videos of yourself lifting weights or running or something, to work on your form. You're thinking, I don't want to do that, but it really helps and it really improves things. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this year. So what about, I wanted to go a bit personal as well and talk about our own lives. So 2021, from the perspective of our own lives, and not only in the, but in the kitchen, obviously, because that's important, but also just a little bit generally, what we've learnt in our own lives this year and what we've done in our own lives this year.
All right.
Maybe you can carry on and shift into your life rather than
actually,
the podcast.
Why don't you go first? Because I think you've got more to say than I do.
Oh, okay. Have I? Oh, okay. Okay, I need to cough now. Hang on.
I saw your notes, so I know you've got more than I do.
I made some notes. Yeah, I made some notes for this. So, so for my life with Rob and Gabriel here, the most important things that have happened this year is that Gabriel has started a school full-time in Florence, and that is something he's never done before. And it's an Italian language school, and it's a beautiful, beautiful school that we are so happy with. And that has meant that our routine's completely changed because he's out of the house 5 days a week, and that's never been the case. It also has meant that there's been a bit more time for Rob and I to move forward with our own projects and to do things because, we need to make ourselves sustainable here in Italy, which we're not at the moment. So we've actually had some time to do some things, which has been wonderful. And Gabriel is thriving at the school. His Italian's improving, and that just it was a decision we made in May, and there were several other things on the horizon that we could have gone towards, and we made a very conscious decision, even though it was a scary decision financially, to move towards this school because it just felt like the right thing. I mean, when I visited the school, I had to stop myself crying. It was so wonderful. So that's been a big thing for us this year. And I think I feel like I've found community this year because we've been in the same place, and I found community online with what I'm doing on Instagram, with what we're doing on the podcast. I've talked to the most amazing people and got involved in conversations and shared things, and it's felt wonderful to have people around me virtually who are into the same things that I'm into.
Yeah.
And then that community is kind of spreading out into real life in person here now, in that, we've been to our farmers market now for almost a year every week, and we're starting to meet people. I've got involved in a permaculture garden here, and I've had my pizza cooked in a wood-fired stove. We're really starting to find community here in Pontisieve, the town where we live. So those three things have been really vital for us this year. In the kitchen, I've done... what haven't I done in the kitchen this year? I tried to remember. So I've done a lot of beer, and I don't think I was making beer at all this time last year. I don't think I'd done anything with it.
I've done a lot of it.
So I went back and found that 5,000-year-old recipe and been trying that. I don't know how many beers I've made, but it's been quite a lot. And I've learnt a lot. I've made a lot of breads, as always, including, trying other techniques other than sourdough. So I've done lots of yeast waters, which has been really interesting. I've done chocolate, which I don't think I was making chocolate this time last year. And that's just been fabulous. I did some strawberry wine. I've done some meat curing for the first time. And then in and around all that activity, I've documented my Turkish millet-based ferment drink, Boza, and made a course of it on my site. And then I've done the same for Suans, a Scottish oat ferment, and I've put that one over at the Fermentation School, who are creating a wonderful project there. I've got videos on my website now for sourdough porridge and polenta, which anyone can go to. I started a newsletter, which is something I've wanted to do for ages, but not had the time until Gabriel went to school.
Yeah, I just got one.
So all those things have happened. Then I thought I'd write what I'd read, because those really are things that have driven me this year. So I read The Secret Life of Chocolate, and we had Marcus on the podcast on one of our earlier episodes.
That was great.
Interviewing him about traditional Mesoamerican chocolate. I read a book called Bibi's Kitchen, which was quite interesting. I've read Stephen Harabuna's Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers, which influenced me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I followed that up with a Farmhouse Brewing Techniques book. I read Paul Barker's Naturally Fermented Bread, which led to the yeast water breads. And then I got another copy of Wild Fermentation, which just sent me off. That's what sent me off on the beers, that book, getting another copy of that. And I've read some Italian books on food, one on bread. And then I've just finished Carolyn Steele's Sitopia, which is a tome of a book and so much history and so much vision that has really inspired me. Mm-hmm. So that's my reading. Mm. And I think what I've learned in my life is that really small things make a difference. So each of these things was just one evening reading, or one attempt at making some beer, one post about something on Instagram. And slowly over the year, things have built and come together. And through persisting with all the things in my life in the kitchen, persisting going out looking for community, persisting in sharing stuff, persisting in beer when it went wrong, I'm creating something for each of those attempts, whether they work or whether they don't, whether they're scary or whether they're not, whether they're difficult. And at the same time, that is teaching me to have patience, because, when I hadn't done those things, I was like, well, I want to be able to make beer. I want to be able to have a community. And I can see that these things take time. But if you consistently apply effort to them, then you get results. And I think I've started to feel those results around me this year through those little regular efforts. And that feels really good. It feels like I'm on the right track.
Yeah. The fermentation.
So yeah, that's me.
Hey, we can all take a shot of kombucha because you mentioned wild fermentation.
Yay!
So I have a few questions for you, Alison, that I think will be illuminating for listeners. Some you have told me a bit about, but I want you to mention since we're on the air. So one, you did allude to it real quickly, but I want you to talk to me about what your reading time looks like. So the books you mentioned, I have seen these books. They're not short books. They're like 600-page books. Okay. And you talked about goes to school. You guys don't have a vehicle, so you're walking to markets. You're taking trains, and you're doing all this cooking. You're writing courses and things like that. So my first question is, talk to me about your reading time.
So the reading time is very important, and it sometimes other things overtake it when the kitchen's a mess and we have to clear it up and there's not much time before bed. But really, I feel like our reading time is a kind of a compass point for me in my life that just guides me every day. So generally after dinner, we have our supper quite early here. We tend to eat somewhere between 4:30 and 6. And then generally we sit around while our dinner's going down. Sometimes Rob will play guitar because he's just rebought a guitar, which is exciting. And then we'll wash up. And by we I mean Rob will wash up. And then once that's done, it's just reading. That's what we do. So sometimes from about 6, sometimes from about 7, sometimes if we're really busy, from about 7:30, we read as a family. And we tend to try to share the books out between us. So we have a family book that Gable is really involved in and we would read together.
What's that?
So you'll be actually pleased to hear at the moment is The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And we just read Harry Potter 1 and 2, which Gabriel's really into. And don't tell him, but he's got the rest of the books for Christmas.
Ooh.
We found some secondhand.
Oh, yes.
So then we just started The Hobbit. Sometimes, I can't remember what other books. Sometimes they're ebooks, sometimes they're actual books. Mm-hmm. And then we tend to read something of my choice as well. And sometimes that's these factual books. So The Secret Life of Chocolate was read out loud by Rob.
Wow.
To both of us. So 700 pages of that book was read with the three of us sitting together on a sofa with Rob reading it out loud. And generally, sometimes Gabriel's engaged, sometimes he isn't, and he plays with Lego or blocks or something, or draws. But he's had all of those words passing over his ears. So we read the Farmhouse Beer book like that. We read Stephen Harabuna's book like that. Sometimes we read fiction. For ages, I've been struggling to find fiction that I liked, but we found a couple of good books this year, which I've enjoyed. And then basically that's our reading time. We then go downstairs, because our bedroom's downstairs, get ready for bed, and then we get into bed, and alternate nights, Gabriel has something read to him which he likes, and then I get to choose something. Rob sometimes gets to choose, but not very often. So that's our evenings. I mean, unless we're going out, which we don't really do in the evenings, because we don't like going out in the evenings.
Yeah.
We like being together and reading and sharing, and so that's how we read. Yeah.
Isn't that the time though,
quite magical,
when families are supposed to be scrolling Instagram and watching reels for hours? Alison?
Yeah, that doesn't happen. It's been hard, but well, as you know, as most people who've been listening to us know, if they've listened to the Why I Gave Away My iPhone episode, I don't have an iPhone, and Rob doesn't have a smartphone, and we, unless there's an absolute emergency, once we sit down for that evening meal, there are no interactions with any form of technology other than ebooks. After that time, the internet goes off, and that's it. So yeah, that's our time. And because we don't have a TV, because we haven't had a TV for so long, I don't even miss it. No. I'd much rather sit on the sofa and have something read to me.
And for everybody who said that you love listening to Alison talk, one of those books that she read out loud, Wuthering Heights, Alison, you were kind enough to actually have Rob record you while you read it, and we have the entire thing posted online. I'll link that in the show notes if people want to go listen to Wuthering Heights for free. I have another question for you, Alison, pertaining to what you said. Go. So you alluded to not underestimating the little chips of time that we put into things that can be taken both positively and negatively. Little chips of time on Instagram can eat away all the productivity of a day. And I know we talked a lot about that on Why I Gave Away My iPhone episode, which I will link that in the show notes as well. But you have these video courses that you produce and sell. You have a blog, you have an Instagram, you have newsletters, you have a podcast. Hello. And yet you have your with all of this that you produce. Oh, you have 2 Instagrams actually, because of the podcast one as well. So with all this online content that you produce, you spend less time online than probably anybody I know. So other than like little people. So I was wondering, and again, you do go over this in more granular detail on the iPhone episode, but I was wondering if you could just briefly describe to us what your online work time looks like.
Yeah, so
because it's inspirational to me that you create all
no notifications on any device. Absolutely 100% essential. And then blocks of time. So if I particularly I tend to do Instagram in the afternoon. So in the morning, if I have a block of time and I have something I want to do, I will not check Instagram, not go anywhere near any form of things like that. And I will just sit down without the internet on and write or create or plan. I have, I kind of do a spider diagram about once a week usually, where I try and get out of my head the chaos of ideas that's in it and put it down on paper. Yeah, I just use coloured paper, and I have all the different areas of my life, and I just have kind of lines coming off it, a bit like a spider, where I put in all the things that need to be done in the house, all the things that need to be, all the things I want to do in the kitchen this week, all the things I've got to do for the podcast this week, all the things I perhaps might write this week, just so I can keep it all down in one place so it doesn't haunt me at night time.
Okay, all right.
And so, yeah, then in the morning I tend to try to work on the most important thing. And I mean, I know people have written books about that, bite the most important thing first. So I will do the most important thing. Sometimes that's Instagram, because I have a lot of my communication on Instagram. But if not, I will sit down and I will plan something, or write a blog post, or work on something in the kitchen. And then I will stop, and I've turned off, and my device is nowhere near me, and that's it. And then really the way that I handle social media is that I really only use Instagram, and I then go on Instagram and I do everything I want to do on Instagram. Then I close Instagram. And because I have no notifications, I don't get that reminder all the time. And I've noticed, because as the years gone on, I've got more followers and I've had much more interaction, and I love that. But I have noticed that my time on Instagram is becoming longer, just to me to get to all the messages and get to all the comments, because I don't want to leave a comment uncommented on. I appreciate community so much, and I appreciate the time that anyone takes to comment on one of my posts. And if people want to share with me, I want to share with them too. So what I've done during the year, as things have kind of hotted up a little bit, and I noticed that I was spending more time, is I've tended to cut some days out of my week more where I don't do stuff. I don't do Instagram. And, because I've got the podcast now, we've got the podcast, that is another channel where I'm sharing stuff and I'm building community. And so Instagram can, the foot can come off the pedal a bit on that, to my previous kind of high standards I set for myself, because it's okay. I've got things that I've done, and the podcast is going along really nicely. And so I'm always conscious of what I'm doing and how much time I'm spending, and making sure that I block things. So, I'll do my email and I'll do my Instagram. And then literally when it's dinner time, it's off. Yeah. That's it. It can wait till tomorrow or wait till the next day.
Do you block your whole day or just your computer time?
Well, the reading is a block. That kind of after dinner thing. Generally, that's a block of reading. I don't block the rest of my day apart from that, really. We have a rhythm, I'd say, rather than block. So I come up in the morning, I generally stir my ferments. I sit down and have a ginger tea or something, and then I'll have breakfast. It's kind of a rhythm. I do that most days. And then most evenings we're reading. Because I cook 3 times a day, most times at lunchtime you'll find me chopping something and cooking something. So it's kind of a rhythm rather than a block.
Yeah.
I think.
I have so many more questions, but I know, I love the way your mind works.
I want to hear about you.
Okay. I just love the way your mind works, and I know these are questions people ask me sometimes, like, wow, how does Alison, she doesn't have a smartphone. Like, you can't actually post in your own stories, right? You have to send it to somebody.
No, I can now. I had to, I didn't used to be able to. When I started on Instagram, I couldn't post any stories at all. But now the device that I have, the version of Android on it, and the situation I've got on that device means I can post stories. I can't post videos. I have to use a different device to post a video. So there's just a way of working with this e-ink screen that I use, that I've learnt what it can do and what it can't do, and I play to its abilities wherever possible. And that's good enough. Yeah, it really is.
Go back to the again, the why I gave up my iPhone episode. If anybody wants to learn more about the e-ink screens, and I have a friend, Alison, whose baby had necessary brain surgery, and she said she doesn't really put her kids in front of screens all that much. But she said what she's noticed is if the baby is in front of a screen, she really behaves differently. Like it really something as a result.
Totally.
So I was telling her a little bit about Rob and his experience and how the way the baby sounds almost as like where Rob was, you know? She just got there by...
That's interesting, isn't it? It's like a sensitivity is just there, and a baby has it right up front and forward, and it just so happens that Rob has not lost that sensitivity, you know, for whatever reason.
So for anyone who does have a kid with like a serious sensitivity to screens and stuff like that, definitely check out that episode, and for sure jump on the Patreon feed and listen to where Rob went really in depth. I asked him a lot of questions. Okay, so my year.
Tell me about you. Yeah, I want to hear about your year, because you've just done such amazing things in your home with your land that I want to hear about it.
Okay, so, what I wrote down, because I was like, let me jot down my thoughts before we start so I don't get lost, was I don't feel like I've done a lot of creative things. I feel more like I've cashed in on a lot of skills that I've spent a long time learning that are now coming into play. So it wasn't that I so much did tons of things that were new to me. So at first I felt a little bad. I was like, man, Alison came up with all these creative things, and she's doing all these fun, like making, botanical waters and things like that. And I was just happy.
But you have 3 children and turkeys and
I was
chickens.
just happy if we had bread on the table, Anyways, I was thinking about in years past, I felt like I was always trying tons of new recipes and learning new skills. But then I realized that was just laying the groundwork for this past year of living out here, finally, on the farm, and having our own birds to tend and butcher and part and pluck and freeze and cook and use and eat. So that's how I feel like my year has been.
And what has that taught you? What has doing all that stuff that you knew about before but you never put into practice, what has it actually taught you?
I think there's 2 things I've learned. One is if you aren't where you want to be yet, just keep working on the skills, because by the time you get to where you want to be, it's too late. It's really helpful if you can learn them when you're not in a crucible. And when I was a teen, I was always very interested in these sorts of things. I had a little garden, and I taught myself canning. And then when we got married, I really dug in. Like, I bought books. I got The Art of Fermentation, and I really wanted to actively learn as many skills as I could. I felt almost like a pressure to do it, because I kept thinking, once we have kids, it will be harder to learn the new skills, because I thought, there's all the day-to-day work. And it's true. It is harder. So I was glad that I spent that time before I had kids. Although I learned a ton of skills after I had kids too. It's just a little bit slower pace, because you can't, sit down and read for 6 hours at a time.
Yeah.
So things that we've done a lot of is chicken, turkey, and duck raising and butchering. So learning those skills. We have not raised a hog, but we have participated in the butchering of hogs, and we've done the parting. Learning how to package meats, learning what my favorite ways to package meats are, packaging and labeling for ourselves. We've done a lot of canning, dehydrating, baking, freezing, and animal husbandry. Less so much gardening. But that will probably come more next year. So we've been working on a huge compost pile with the intent of being able to use it next year on our garden. So that's awesome. So that's kind of how it feels like it's been.
Nice. And what have the birds taught you? Because I know you had some birds that have died, and you've raised your own birds, and you've like you said, you've killed a bird. You've killed birds. So I'm wondering what that kind of cycle has left, what imprint that's left on you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and I just realized I said I learned 2 things. One was cashing in on the, learn the skills now while you have the chance, and the other was that it's okay to not be in a hyper creative mode sometimes just to be in the
totally
mode. And then I have noticed, actually, in the past month, my creativity has started to jump up again, and I think it's just because winter's coming. It's slowing down a little bit. I spent more time at home. So, the birds. So, I had butchered before. I had done the kill before. We had our own animals, but I had never raised the animals myself and then also butchered them. So, one thing I learned is that it's okay, and I think it's even a good thing to name the animals even if you're going to butcher them. I know people always say, don't name the animals, but I say, why? Why not name the animals? Why not build a relationship with the animal and love it and then appreciate it all the more when it passes out of this life into the next and leaves the nutrition behind in the body to sustain you and your family? Why not name the animal and appreciate it? So we also put the name of the animal on the packages that go in the freezer so we know which one it was. And I love what Slow Down Farmstead says. She says, we always put the name on the package so that when we eat the meal, we know who to say thank you to. And I thought that was
that's nice.
Yeah. So we like to bless our food before we eat it. And when we say the prayer, we also say, thank you for, Stripey, the turkey we had for Thanksgiving, his fun personality and how friendly he was. And we just appreciate that bird. So the containers of broth and the containers of meat and the organs and things end up with the name on them. So I've definitely increased my appreciation of farmers all around the world.
Yeah.
I, of course, appreciated them before, as I know you do as well. And you and I have visited farms and things like that. So it's not like we're unfamiliar with the aspects. But when every day, you're either crawling through the mud or literally crawling through the snow to gather the eggs, because if you stand, you're going to fall down the hill and smash all your eggs, which I've done before. When you're doing these things and the water freezes and you're out there at the, crack of dawn trying to melt water or get them thawed water, and, or an animal has a problem and you have to, drop everything you're doing, turn the car off, cancel your plans, go take care of it. These things they wait for no man. There's no holiday that a farmer gets. There's no day off, because that would be like a day off from feeding your kids. You don't get a holiday from feeding your kids. You got to feed them. So I've learned that farming and everything on the farm, actually, I think in all life, if you really boil it down, but everything on a farm revolves around two things: feeding creatures and getting rid of the waste. That's literally
simple as that.
Thing.
Yeah.
That's it. Everything revolves around that. It's been really wonderful. Sometimes it's been hard. Sometimes it's felt overwhelming. And then you just have to, Lexi said a really good phrase to me. She said, are you managing your house or is your house managing you? And when I start to feel overwhelmed, I run that through my brain. And I think, am I managing the house or am I letting the house manage me? And it just lets me sort of shake myself and step back into the driver's seat. And the other thing is, somebody sent a picture of this guy, like his face sticking up out of the water, drowning. And it shows like me with my life problems. And then the next picture is like a side view of him. He's sitting in like 1 foot of water with just his head sticking out of the water. And it's like, dishes, laundry. It's not really that big of a thing. We just let it become in our mind.
Yeah, you've worked hard this year. I mean, I think that, we've both done things, but like you said, you're working, you're building something, and you're using the skills that you built on and learnt before. And yeah, God, crikey, with all of that, you've done a lot this year. There's no looking at what I've done and saying that you haven't, because wow, and I've seen and heard firsthand how many issues there's been with the birds and how difficult it's been. So I give you so much credit for that. It's amazing.
Fun.
I mean, I think
Every
it is.
skill you learn will come into play. Business, hospitality, all of that has come into play as we've also started the hip camp out here so that we can generate
I
basically
forgot all about that.
basically just
Done that as
generating
well.
some funds on the farm to help the farm sustain itself and help us work on the property. And that has been a big learning experience too, and also just really wonderful. And again, Sabrina and Colleen have jumped in and helped with that a ton. Colleen came out and took pictures a couple of times. She just took tons of pictures. Sabrina was getting on Zoom calls with me and helping me take notes on things, to learn about running a successful hip camp and things like that. So those girls have really, I guess the other thing I've learned this year is your community is so important. And you mentioned that too, Alison, like the patrons that have jumped in to help us run the podcast, and just my mom and my dad and Gary's parents, and just the people who come alongside you, who believe in you, even if they don't understand or what you're doing isn't their thing. They just like, hey, Alison, I don't know anything about botanical water, but I believe in you, and I know you're creating something, so I want to help and be a part of this, that really means a lot, and is really, really, that's the powerful thing.
Thank you. That's nice to hear you talk about your year and what's come of it. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Therapy with Alison again.
So 2022, it's nearly here, and I thought we could finish off by talking very briefly about what our plans are for next year, both for the podcast and for our lives.
Okay.
So shall I go first again?
You should.
So for the podcast, I want to carry on. I'd like to, for sure. And I want to carry on having really interesting guests, because the guests have given us so much different perspective. But I also want to carry on having chats with you and covering really interesting topics. Carry on building the Patreon community. So hopefully this time next year we'll have more patrons.
Yeah. And
do more of the interaction with them, meeting with them, and where they can meet each other as well. That would be really quite, that would satisfy me.
Yeah.
In my kitchen and in my life, I want to stay where I am. I have moved far too many times in the last decade, and that is the biggest reason why I have not developed any community. And Rob and I kind of made a pact that, we were plonked here. We didn't intend to move to this particular town, and we had a crisis a couple of years ago, and we ended up here, and we just said, right, we got to stay.
Yeah.
This is important for everyone.
Yeah.
So I want to stay here, and I want to carry on building my community. I want to keep on having fun with my family and my friends and in my kitchen. I want to share what I love doing, which I've done really satisfyingly this year. And I want to keep measuring myself by my own standards, not by someone else's standards.
Oh, yes, Alison.
Even if that means that I've got to have a crazy amount of faith that there's an answer out there somewhere to a dilemma, or that what I want or need in my life will come to me. So even if it seems impossible, I want to use my own kind of compass to guide me, not someone else's.
Yeah.
I'm in the kitchen. I want to make more beer. I want to get much better at making beer, and I want to understand it more, and I want to make more bread. And then we'll see what other ferments come in and what other ways of cooking come into me. I love learning about ancient fermentation techniques, and that's where I want to stay. And I'd like to start writing a book next year, because I love writing, as I said earlier on. And I want to do some more courses. Hopefully I will do some more courses and get those out there. And I also hope that I will be able to start just getting organised enough to write something more than Instagram posts and blog posts.
Would you ever do a botanical yeast course? Would you ever do something like that?
I might do. I'd have to make some more botanical yeast books, some more botanical yeast breads. But I'd certainly do some bread courses for sure. So hopefully maybe a bread course or two next year.
That'd be great.
And a book. hopefully, she says. And I'll listen to this at the end of next year and think, what are you thinking, Alison?
Oh, Alison, I will nag you for everybody's sake.
So how about you? Tell me about how you feel about the podcast next year, because I haven't actually asked you. And what's going on in your life and kitchen next year, what you want to do.
Because it's like, honestly, I look forward to Tuesday because I know I get to sit for an hour plus and talk and just not walk around and be off my feet for a minute. And hear your British accent. So one of the things that I have been working on actively, and I put a lot of thought and energy and dopamine into this, and I'm continuing to work on this, is refining my kitchen management skills. And I know I actually talked to Aaron, Chef Aaron, and he and I are going to record a special episode for the patrons on kitchen management. Things that he's learned from his professional years and working with farms and things like that. Working in a kitchen that works off of a farm is different than working in a kitchen that just gets frozen food delivered from, a Cisco truck or something. Yeah. So there's different management skills that come into play there, and I want to learn that from him. I've been working on my own self-discipline and habits, because that rolls over into the kitchen. And you and I know we talked about this before, but people ask you all the time, Alison, where do you find the time? And I'll refer people again to why I gave away my iPhone episode. Alison's not scrolling Instagram and the little minutes in between, and it's insane how much those things can add up to. And I definitely get sucked into that social media dopamine cycle, or whatever you said it was called, where like you think you've been on it for 5 minutes and 20 minutes has passed. You think you've been on it for 20 minutes and an hour has passed. It's like, what? Yeah. So I have to manage myself because I can't trust myself. So I've been like, I'll write down one of the best things I've learned. I learned this a couple years ago, was to time yourself doing a task. So for instance, this probably is useless information to you, Alison, so you can just like go get some tea or something. But for the rest of us, humans without halos, who fall prey.
I can't see my halo. There's a mirror over there. I can't see it. It must just be invisible to me.
Those of us who still fall prey to the distractions of this world, I write down, like if I have a list of tasks or whatever, if I just one task, if you just thinking, I don't have time to load the dishwasher, well, actually time yourself loading. I don't have a dishwasher, but I timed myself loading the dishwasher at the old house, or I timed myself doing dishes, or time yourself making your bed, or whatever it is. It's totally mind-blowing and super helpful, because sometimes you realize, wow, this actually takes way less time than I in my head thought. Like you think, I don't have time to make my bed. And I'm really picky about making my bed. Like I want the pillows just right. I want the sheet just right, and I've timed.
You've got the halo there. I can see our bed from here and it's messy.
Well, it's because of the hip camp. It's made me really obsessive about linens.
Yeah.
But I timed myself making the bed one time, because I get up first, and I usually have a couple hours into my day before the last of the little babies wake up and come out of the bed. And so it's not like I can just get up and make my bed. So I have to put it on my task list to remind myself. Otherwise I won't go back to the bedroom and I won't see it and I won't remember. Yeah. And I would always think, I just don't have the time to go make it. So I started timing myself making it. And at the most, it takes 4 minutes. So when I think, I don't have time to make my bed, I think, really? You don't have 4 minutes? Like, that's 2 reels on Instagram or whatever, just go.
That's telling, isn't it?
So that's been really helpful for me. And if you are like me and you get distracted, or you try to do 12 things at once and don't do any of them very well, or you just make things into a monument in your mind, that is my helpful tip for you. So I'm putting that into play a lot, working on my kitchen management this year, just knowing how much time it is. And you talked about time blocks for your Instagram, Alison. I do that on my chores too. So you say, the block is an hour or whatever that you're working on emails or something, and then you're done. and whatever's not done waits till tomorrow. So I've actually had to employ that. Again, Lexi mentioned something to me about, I can't remember even why we were talking about this, but she was saying that somebody was telling her, sometimes you can work so long on getting your kitchen so perfect that it actually becomes like a distraction and a non-productive behavior, because you think to yourself,
Yeah, I agree with that.
oh, good. You just think, well, I'm cleaning the kitchen, I'm being productive, but there comes a certain point. Obviously deep cleanings are needed, but there comes a certain point, and I totally get sucked into this, where I'm like, let me just scrub this crack out, and let me just like scrub the sink one more time, and then it's just too much. So for the first time in my life, I've had to put a time limit on how much time I can spend working in the kitchen, doing like, the refresh after a meal or whatever. And when that time is done, it's done. And this is going to sound really dumb, but it actually stays cleaner when I put a time limit on it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. That's something that I've noticed over the last decade being with Rob, that that has to be really clean, that has to be really clean. And he just doesn't see it and doesn't notice. And you know what? He just said, just leave it. Come and sit down. Let's read. And the world doesn't end.
Right. This is the shocking thing, Alison. The sun keeps going. Yeah. The stars keep coming out at night, and the birds keep waking up in the morning. It's even if you didn't.
Good enough is good enough, really. Good enough is good enough. And, if it's a creative process for you, like writing or making art or, making a cake or something, then sometimes you want it to be extra special. I know when I've painted in the past, good enough isn't good enough. It has to be how I want it to be. And that's the tension of being in the creative process. But when it's your kitchen and you're using it 3 times a day and you just need it to be clean, good enough is good enough.
Functional. You need it to be functional. Yeah. That's what you need. And actually, Alison, even with painting and writing and everything, I've heard so many people, even great painters from the past and authors, I think even J.K. Rowling, who you mentioned, has said this too, that you can keep going back to it until you kill it. And there's a certain point where you have to stop and walk away. And I've heard authors say, even, sometimes they go back and they look at their books and they say, oh, I wish I had changed that word. But at a certain point, you had to quit.
Yeah.
So that's definitely...
It's the same in the kitchen.
Yeah, sadly for us.
That's a really nice wisdom to finish on if you're done with sharing your plans for next year, because I think that's a really good...
I've used up everything I have to give, Alison.
A really good piece of advice to leave it with. Well, this is our last episode for 2021 because we're taking a break.
Yes.
There'll be one podcast missing. We'll be back on the 4th of January next year with an episode, hopefully.
Something.
And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's listened, who's commented, who's shared. We appreciate every conversation that has come from part of this podcast.
Yes, thank you.
And do talk to us, do send us your feedback, do let us know if there's topics you want us to cover, do ask questions and do share with us, because we love it. Thank you.
And send me your microphone tips. If you have tips for me and my microphone woes, send them.
Oh Lord.
Okay, Alison.
Okay, well,
let's wrap it.
I'll speak to you next year.
Talk to you next year. Bye.
Will do. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Alison's at Ancestral_Kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.